Good morning, Charles.
Good morning, Dan. How are you?
I'm great.
Good. I am great too. I'm tired. I'm a little tired. I'm great, but I'm a little tired.
Okay. All
I
right.
had a I had a dental appointment on Tuesday and got an updated set of X-rays.
Okay.
And my mouth and face have been hurting pretty much all week since then, just from the stretching and having my jaw wide open and
Oh, wow.
clenching down on the little bite tool that they put
Yeah.
inside. It's just, yeah, my whole jaw.
Is that
You think as much as I talk, I would my those muscles would be ready to go. But yeah, just I don't know. My lymph nodes under my throat have been a little swollen
oh,
too. So I haven't felt sick, and I went ahead and took a COVID test yesterday morning just to make sure I wasn't dealing with anything like that, and that
mm,
came back negative, as it always does, since I've never caught it and
yeah.
hopefully never will. Um, but I do know I've seen quite a few posts on social media the last week though of friends of mine who have said, well, I dodged this thing for almost 2.5 years, but it now, this week it finally caught up to me. There's a
Yep.
lot of that going around right now.
Yeah, one of my family members also he
Yeah.
got it in Vegas, and all he did was post on Facebook. It was a test, and it had two lines on it, and he didn't say what it was. And
Oh
he's like,
yeah.
"Well, I just came back from Vegas, and I didn't get an STD." And people were like, "Oh my God, what are you pregnant?" And this guy,
Yeah.
so yeah, there's we had some good fun at his expense there. But yeah, I've heard that as well. So
Yeah, I saw there's some new variant, as there always is, that is starting to pass itself around people. So we'll see.
yeah,
We'll see what I mean, summer's supposed to be good for communicable diseases because people are outdoors and stuff like that. And winter is supposed to be the rough time, but we'll
yeah.
see. I don't
Well,
know if that's the case in Florida, because in Florida, a lot of people spend the time indoors, going to movies and in shopping malls because of how hot it is.
yeah, yeah.
So we'll see.
That, and I feel like part of it is, I think traditionally, I mean, I guess over the last couple of decades, I think summertime is usually a little bit more of a relaxed time for people. But I
Yeah.
think given everybody being so stressed out by everything, from the pandemic to all the garbage that the news is feeding us and everything else, I think people are stressed, and so I think we might be imbibing in and engaging in not so healthy activities a little bit more than usual, and that's going to mess with our immune system, and that's really
Right.
and so maybe we stay up later and we have a couple too, maybe we drink a little bit more, and maybe we go for the comfort food a little bit more often than we should.
Yeah.
Maybe we get a little bit lazy and stay in and watch movies a little bit more. We've got a lot more streaming choices these days, so all of those things combined destroy our immune system. So
Yeah.
I think we're all more susceptible to getting sick.
Yeah,
So
we'll see. I hope I can stay relatively healthy and not catch anything
yeah.
that is gonna keep me away from work or away from having fun.
I know you've been driving a lot too, long
Yeah.
distances,
Yeah.
and people don't, you think you're just sitting there, you just looking at the road, but
No.
it does wear you down.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
the other thing too is you're not out, you don't have a convertible, where you're getting fresh air all the
Right,
time.
right,
Even if you
right.
get the window cracked, it's still not, you're still kind of inside space there. And that extra stress and everything else like that, and then might affect your sleep. Now you're not sleeping as well, and
Yeah.
it kind of snowballs from there. So
Yeah, sitting in a car seat is not the same as sitting in a comfortable chair at home, or even
No.
or even a comfortable chair at work at your office. It is not the same. I mean,
Right.
your nervous system. You're speeding down the road in a 6,000 pound cage going 80 miles an hour, and your nervous system knows that that's what's going on.
Yeah.
And so it expends the amount of energy necessary to keep you alert and keep you alive doing that activity. So it is, yeah, the idea of I just relaxed, I just did a quick road trip down to South Florida and back. It's like, no, that's obviously it's not as bad as going for a jog or riding your bicycle, but it's not
Yeah.
nothing either.
Yeah. I know. I know, when my throat starts to get a little scratchy or itchy, whatever, and that's the first indication that I might be getting sick. So then I just slow everything down. I take some oregano oil, some vitamin C, try to get a little extra sleep, and usually I'm okay, thankfully. But I know in the past when I haven't done that, it's developed into something worse. So
I'm feeling pretty good so far. I don't really have again, other than this little bit of mouth pain that I don't know if that's the dentist visit. I don't know what it is, but it's not that bad. So it's nothing that a couple Excedrin aren't making me completely forget about. So I count myself lucky. But I will look forward to somewhat of a relaxing weekend of doing chores around the house and laying down, maybe reading some books and watching some TV.
Nice.
Yeah, I'm due for one of those.
Very nice.
All right, let's jump into this lovely book of ours that we're enjoying so much. At least I am. It really is it's a nice change from some of the heavier stuff that we've worked on in the past. I mean, it's heavy topics, but she just does it so well. And there's every couple paragraphs, there's like, oh, I should try that. There's these helpful little tidbits that she's putting out there, and it's a very encouraging book to read. I love it.
Yeah, even though they, it addresses topics that can be very, very upsetting. She does it in a way where, you're excited to try some of these things. You've got hope, and it's definitely an easy read. So
yeah, I'll just go down the list with some of the bullet points that I've really picked up in this section, starting with chapter 10 that I love, which is the first one. Emotions are neither your enemy nor your friend, which is tough to remember. I mean, I tend to err on the side of emotions are the enemy, because I like the thing that Glover says in No More Mr. Nice Guy. There's two kinds of feelings nice guys don't like: theirs and other people's. And that's definitely something I fall into sometimes, where I don't like my emotions. I don't like the need I have, the very human need I have as a human being to occasionally display my emotions through the things I do and say. It makes me a little uncomfortable, but it's what makes me a human, a Homo sapien as well. So it's the only option I have is to figure out ways to be comfortable with that. And boy, is it tough sometimes.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, and my biggest takeaway is that, from this chapter was just that emotions are not facts, right? They're real and they're valid, but they're not facts. And they basically are a byproduct of our brain trying to protect ourselves. Right. And so a lot of times there's, assumptions are made and information isn't taken into account. And it's just basically a reaction to keep you safe and alive. And she talks about, one of the ways to manage the emotion. And that's the thing is you don't, that the theme is, you don't make it go you don't make them go away. You manage them. You learn, you learn the skills on how to manage them because you can't. It's a losing battle to try to think that you're going to not have emotions or that you're going to have the result that you want by pushing them away or ignoring them. And so she re-emphasizes, tools and ways to manage them so that you become more resilient and you become more prepared for yourself and experiencing different things. And so if you can manage those emotions, you get confident in managing those emotions, you're going to have less anxiety about new situations because you'll be able to handle it no matter what comes up for you. Right.
Right. Yeah. The more somebody, especially men, in my experience, the more somebody tries to sell themselves as a Mr. Spock, I'm just logical, I have all my emotions completely in control, the more they sell themselves as that kind of person, the more it's okay, so you're a piece of dynamite with a fuse that is already lit, and I just don't know how close the fire is to the stick versus how long the fuse is. But it's just a matter of time for us to all find out how long your fuse is and what happens when it gets to the end. So
that's totally true.
Watch out for people who talk about themselves in those terms of, I'm logical, I'm not governed by my emotions, blah, blah, blah. It's countdown to explosion with people who talk like that, unfortunately.
Yeah. Yeah. That's, you're just walling it off, right? You're
Right.
basically going,
You're trying to,
you're
yeah,
trying to, but that's losing battle. Like she talks about that with,
exactly.
I don't know if it was this chapter or the next one, but basically like how it would be basically like you standing in the ocean and
Yeah,
going,
it's
I'm
a-
going to
yeah,
stop these waves from coming in. Right.
exactly.
Yeah. All
Right.
right. Yeah. Good luck
Yeah.
with that.
Yeah. I'm sure. Yeah. The person who decides to do that, you can watch them very quickly fail at that and see what happens as a result. So, um, yeah. And one of the other things I like is, the prescription for painful emotions is curiosity.
Right.
And that's a recurring theme with this book is notice and wonder. When stuff is happening to you, when you're going through stuff, try to notice what it is that is happening, and then wonder about that, and wonder about where it's coming from, wonder about why it's happening, wonder about these things. Because if you're spending your time wondering, then that's time that you're not spending judging yourself and criticizing yourself and trying to turn off the parts of you that make you who you are.
And at the same time, because emotions are a passing feeling, they don't last forever.
Right.
The time that you're spending wondering and noticing is time you are then putting in, so that and during that time, those emotions could be coming down a little bit, could be lessening a little bit. But when you're doing that, you're focusing your attention on doing something else.
Right.
You're giving less time and attention and energy to those emotions. I think it's going to be a way of also very quickly diminishing them and letting them pass, and just the ocean waves kind of going back into the ocean at that point, right? She talks about, in the toolkit, she talks about for this chapter, she talks about writing things down when you and in terms of where you feel those emotions in your body, what thoughts you have. There's a few questions she goes through in that toolkit, and really just try to help you understand what the effect those emotions are having on you.
Right.
And then the next best thing after that would be, if you need if you have a friend that you trust, talk to them about that, because they can probably more quickly than you come up with different perspectives, right? So that's the whole point here, is that understanding that these feelings that you're having aren't necessarily factual. And if they're not factual, well, then that means that there are other possible interpretations of that situation.
Right.
And having somebody trusted to talk to about that, they're not feeling it, they're not being impacted by all those emotions. They could very quickly give you some alternative perspectives and highlight any biases that you might have in that situation. Based on your past experiences, you might be you might be thinking a certain way that's completely just based on your past experiences.
Yeah, I think it could be helpful to have a friend who's able to stop you and say, hey, I've noticed that when it comes to difficulties at work or difficulties in your romantic relationship or difficulties with your kid, you tend to catastrophize small problems and turn them into things that are bigger. You make them feel bigger than they actually are. Are you sure that's not something that you're doing right now? Having somebody in your life that can ask you those questions and that you're willing to listen to and hear that from is a real benefit. And it's good to try to foster those relationships so that you have people that are willing and able to say things like that to you. In the next chapter, she gets into something that I really enjoy, which is where she talks about this tendency we have to take our identity from our feelings, where we fall into this trap of thinking my feelings are who I am. I'm a happy person, or I'm a sad person, or I'm a depressed person, or I'm a fearful person, where your feelings don't need to and shouldn't define who you are to yourself or to others. And I can appreciate and empathize with that experience. One could make the argument that your actions should be what you look to for your identity, not your feelings. But even that seems a little too black and white, to just say I am my actions or I am my feelings. It's the whole concept of a sense of self, and who is Charles moment by moment, and what does it mean to be Charles? These are big things that philosophers and theologians and psychologists have grappled with for many, many, many years.
Mm-hmm.
And so just to decide I'm a happy person or I'm a sad person, it does seem a little too simplistic to understand the conditions going on inside of you and who you are, right?
Yeah, yeah. And a point that she kind of keeps coming back to here is that something, again, a big takeaway from this chapter for me was how much our physical state impacts our emotions.
Right.
And she says, as you start being curious about your emotions, she says, start with your physical and look back and be curious, have curiosity, be curious about, hey, how have you been sleeping? How have you been eating? Have you been exercising? Have you been doing, the self-care that you normally do to take care of your physical state? She says, fix that first. And then you can start looking at the mental health at that point, because if you don't have that solid foundation, your body then is stressed, and it's not feeling that it's safe, because you don't have enough sleep, you don't have enough rest, you don't have the proper nutrition, you haven't been treating it right. So now your mind and your brain is going to be on alert. So it's going to be very difficult to figure out, okay, what is actually a mental health issue, and what is actually your brain going, I need to survive here and I need to do these certain things. So, thinking about it that way, I was like, oh yeah, she just reemphasized how important that is, that mind body connection.
Yeah. It, sometimes we can have this attitude like our body is just a vehicle that our mind drives around and it gets us from place to place.
Yeah.
But it is a lot more, there's a lot more integration between our body and our mind than sometimes we think about. And it can feel that way. It can feel like, who Charles really is the mind behind my eyes. And this body of mine is just the car that I drive around in, you know what I mean? But no, it's so much more complex than that. And there's so much bidirectional information between my mind and my body constantly that influences my thoughts and influences my physical states.
So here's something that I just thought of when you pointed your head and then your body, when you're talking about that, we went on the Avatar ride, right? We're on a Banshee, right?
Yeah.
And one of the things they do is they kind of hook up, right, that in the movie, right, they hook up, your brain to the animal itself, and there's communication back and forth.
Right. Yeah.
It's kind of the same thing. If you think about it, right?
Yeah.
It's not just a one way. It's not literally your mind, like somebody sitting in a car, and the car gives you some feedback, but it's not affecting your brain quite the way, your body does.
Right. Exactly.
With that feedback. So, yeah. And at the end of this, she also talks about how important it is to name those feelings and try to be specific about what you're going through, to kind of help define what's actually happening, right? And I know in the next chapter she talks about the feelings wheel, and I know you got a couple of stickers of the feelings wheel, and I looked at it online. I thought it was really, I couldn't believe how many different words there are,
I know,
to describe, but it's very helpful because it kind of brings you from a very generalized state, right, to more specific. Why don't you talk a little bit more about the feelings wheel and how you've used it?
Yeah, so I have mine. I got like 6 stickers for $6 on Amazon, and I've got a big one on the journal that I write in every morning. And it starts on the inside. There's 6 named emotions: happy, sad, anger, disgust, fear, and surprise. And then as you move out the wheel to the less vivid colors, it just breaks it down into more and more emotions that fit in those categories. Can you
give an example of?
Yeah.
Let's do sad.
Okay. Right? So sad splits into 6 choices. So if you're feeling sad, you can say, okay, I feel sad, but what does that really mean? Does that mean that I am feeling guilt, abandonment, despair, depression, loneliness, or boredom? And then once you sort of focus on one of those, let's say I think I'm feeling despair, then despair is divided out further into 2 of powerlessness and vulnerability.
Wow.
Yeah, so you can really start broad and sort of drill down to say, okay, I'm going to give a very specific name to what it is that I'm feeling within myself right now. And then, the other thing I've noticed in my own life is that some emotional states have a very clear causal relationship with one another. Meaning, I've noticed if I'm feeling defensive in a whether it's in a work meeting, or more likely, a discussion of a personal nature in a personal relationship, if I'm feeling defensive about something, the precursor to that defensive feeling is some sort of a threat or insecurity. Like I'm not sure where I stand with this person, or I'm not sure if this person really likes me, or I'm not sure if this person respects my technical ability in this meeting, or something like that. If I'm feeling defensive, there's always something that happened before that defensiveness that kind of got me in that place. And I think with this feelings wheel, it's easy to say, okay, I'm feeling this right now. What are these other emotions, kind of next door neighbors, that I may have been feeling before I got to this other point?
That's great. Yeah. And it sounds like it really kind of, for me, it sounds like it would help me zero in on the facts of the situation, not the facts, but basically analyzing the situation a little bit more and go, okay, what is that accurate? Right. And
Right.
I'd start thinking, okay, what other experiences have I had with that person? And then I might think, oh, well, you know what? They complimented me the other day on this. So, or they were constantly criticizing me about that. So, this is a little bit more accurate, a little bit less accurate. I like that. Let's do another one. Let's do happy. Let's go down one of those.
Sure.
It's really, how many? Do you know how many different?
There are 6 primaries, and then each of those 6 have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So that would be 48 secondaries. And then each of those 8 has 2 more. So I guess that would be 6 times
96.
16 tertiary emotions.
Is it 96?
Oh, how are you going to shame me like this, Dan?
So
16 times 6 is 96. Yes, sir.
Yeah. So 96 different terms for a feeling that we're having. I know my vocabulary. I can do the math. I can't do the vocabulary.
I cannot.
That's unbelievable.
If you ask me to name every feeling or emotion that I could think of, I don't know what the number would be, but I know it would be less than 96.
Yeah. And I mean, it's interesting because Brene Brown, the Atlas of the Heart, she goes into this very topic about how we need to improve, how most people in the world need to improve our vocabulary when it comes to our experiences and our feelings. And when we do that, I feel like I think that the theme is we can deal with our anxiety and our feelings a little bit better. If you don't mind just entertaining me here and just do like a happy one.
So the 8 of them that break down happiness a little bit further to another level are joyful, interested, proud, accepted, powerful, peaceful, intimate, and optimistic.
Oh.
Hear any of those you'd like me to break down further?
Intimate
breaks down into both playful and sensitive.
Okay, that's pretty specific.
So again, for $6 on Amazon Prime, I've only used one of these 6 stickers that I got 3 big ones and 3 small ones, and I haven't done anything with the others yet. Although since I write in this book 3 pages a day, almost every day. I go through these books pretty quickly, doing that.
So you're going to need them for the future. Yeah. So
exactly.
So how have you used that wheel with your journaling? Have you yet? Or
no, usually,
and are there any guidelines with I mean, I know you just bought some stickers, so I don't know if there's any guidelines that come with that at all, and like how to really make use of them.
I did look up the feelings wheel because in one of her mentions of it, she cites who came up with it. It was a person named Wilcox, I believe.
Right. Yeah. From
1982.
That's nuts.
Yeah. And so
40 years this thing's been around.
If you Google the feeling wheel by Gloria Wilcox, you'll find some additional information on it. And there will probably be some articles where people can advise you a little bit more on how to use it effectively. The way I've used it so far, other than podcast content, has been as part of my self debriefing after a difficult experience or a difficult conversation, then I take a look at it and say, okay, which one of these can I tick off that I feel like I experienced or I went through during this challenging situation? And then, just trying to ask myself some questions about, okay, what order were these feelings in, and which one gave birth to the next one, and things like that.
Yeah, that's great.
I hope so. It's one of those things where, you do it for a while, and hopefully you become the person who does this sort of work, and then you get to reap the benefits of it. But, just like going to the gym and lifting something heavy, the first time you do it you're not going to look in the mirror and say, oh, I'm the guy that works out every day. Just because you've worked out every day for the last 2 days doesn't mean you're going to look in the mirror and see yourself as the guy that works out every day.
Right.
So,
yeah.
Let's see some other things. One of the bottom chapter summary items on number 11 was the advice to allow emotions to be present and soothe your way through rather than blocking them out, which, again, is just a function of noticing. Notice. That's the note that I made. Notice your emotions. Don't try to avoid them. Don't try to stop them. Don't try to block them. Just notice them and give yourself the time and the space to notice them, and then see how that feels.
Yeah.
And it'll feel way better than trying to block them out.
Yep.
Yeah. So the next chapter, she gets into the feelings wheel a little bit more, and encourages people to build your emotional vocabulary.
Yeah, and I think that'll help with the noticing, right?
Yes, absolutely.
By keeping up, I know you're like, well, hopefully it'll pay off, but I think it's it's kind of like a sneaky type of subtle change, right? Like you said, it's not going to be a night and day before and after type of difference. I think it's just going to be one of those things where you're going to be building up that vocabulary, building up that mental muscle, building up those neural pathways. She talks about in this chapter journaling, not just the bad stuff, but the good stuff as well, because that is what builds those, the neural pathways, so that you actually will help you notice, I think, the positive moments, in life as well. But you need to practice that by journaling.
Yeah. And I would say that one of the other resources that's, really top of the food chain for building your emotional vocabulary is pretty much read, listen, consume anything Brene Brown says or puts out. I mean, really, she seems to be, one of the experts at that ability to discuss emotions, and particularly the ones that feel a little bit more negative, the ability to identify those and feel them in the moment, and understand what's happening to you when you're dealing with those things. She is really, she's grown to be one of my absolute favorite public intellectuals that talks in the space of, psychology and personal development. So I can't recommend her stuff enough. I'm working, I'm about to start with a friend going through pretty much Brene Brown's entire bibliography, and starting at the beginning of her writings and then going through each of the books that she's written, and seeing what I can pick up from them, and then also which of those books might be the best candidates for you and I to investigate on the podcast.
For sure. Yeah. I definitely like a lot of her stuff. And then, even the HBO special that she had on there, Apples of the Heart. It was great.
Have you watched the whole thing yet?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. I haven't watched the whole thing. I just started the first episode, and I decided I want to make some more progress in some of her other works before I finish it. But I love how she kind of weaves in the pop culture stuff in with the things she's talking about. Like, I want to talk about this feeling, and to illustrate this feeling, here's a scene from Harry Potter or from Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
And it's so, I mean, just being able to tie in, art that everybody recognizes in that way is so helpful to be able to say, oh yeah, I understand what that feels like.
Yeah. She's sneaky. What she does is she generates the feelings first, and then she tells you, okay, this is what that is, right? It's not, it's more specific than happy. It's more specific than sad. It's, it's anguish, or it's disgust, or it's pride, or whatever that might be.
I think,
and
I want to say from the first episode, I think it was the scene from Jurassic Park where Dr. Grant and Ellie, first see the dinosaurs are sitting in the Jeep, and they see the dinosaurs, and you hear the
real
theme
live
from
dinosaurs. Yeah.
you hear the theme from Jurassic Park, and she labels that one. She's like, okay, that's wonder. That's what wonder feels like. And it's like, yeah, that is exactly, because to look at these two paleontologists who are seeing real life dinosaurs for the first time, to say that they're happy just doesn't cover it.
No. Correct. Yeah. But it's easy, right? And you look at their face, you're hearing the music, and you're seeing the dinosaurs too.
Right.
So all of those things, I wonder how long it took her to come up with those different scenes, because they're very good. They're very specific, absolutely. And they're right on the nose when it comes to the feelings that she's describing.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to revisiting that book of hers and watching the HBO special. I think there's definitely some value in there for people who want to be able to identify feelings, not just theirs but other people's, a little bit more closely.
Yeah, I mean, it's all training, right?
Right, exactly.
That's what this is, right? This is really by being able to describe and come up with more words and able to be more accurate with how we're describing things. It's like training for anything else. It is becoming familiar with your body, with your feelings and what's going on. And yeah, that means it's going to take some time and effort and work, but it will pay off in the end. It'll allow you to manage your emotions a lot more easily.
Yeah. I mean, what makes you better at being better at being a human than understanding yourself more? I mean, I would say that most of the problems we have in certainly Western society, if not the world, is a result of people who do not understand themselves and what they're going through and how and why they're reacting to the world around them.
Yeah. And the other thing is, I mean, the other part of that is you have to be able to try it, or at least attempt to understand other people. And so if you can't understand yourself, you're starting, it's a guessing game. Good luck trying to understand somebody else when you haven't even built the skill set or know what tools to use to understand somebody else, because you haven't even used them on yourself yet. Right.
Yeah.
So good luck.
Yeah. And I mean, that leads us into, what you can do to support other people that are having difficulty or problems, which
good transition right there.
Yeah.
Chapter 13. Yeah.
If you can't understand yourself and you're not in touch in any way with what you go through, then how can you possibly hope to support somebody else who's going through something? And it can be overwhelming. It can feel, when somebody is experiencing depression or anxiety or any of the quote unquote negative emotions from the feelings wheel, such as someone's feeling guilty or abandoned or in despair or depressed or lonely or bored. How do you support those people? It can take a lot, and it can be very intimidating to think, what is it I can do to help them? And look, some of us will have an impulse of, I don't want to make their problems worse, so maybe I should just stay away from them. And that's a very human reaction to have to somebody who's going through something, but it's not really the thing that they need or the thing that you need, to just distance yourself because it's difficult.
And, I know, you and I are both fixers, right? So we have a tendency to want to fix things and make things okay. Yeah. And I think if we don't have an obvious solution that comes to our mind, an easier thing to do is to push away and to ignore and to not be there for that person. And she addresses that in this chapter and really kind of reminds us that you may not need to be giving a solution. Sometimes people just want, someone to vent to and not to just make these assumptions. And so she reemphasizes being curious as well. So just like you'd be curious with your own emotions, be curious with those, with the other person's emotions, and ask, hey, what are you thinking, instead of, are you okay? Right. Or you need to do this, right?
Right.
Ask, hey, or how can I best support you is one that I really like, because that way you're staying curious and you're allowing the other person to tell you what they need.
Yeah, one of the great questions that Brene Brown said once when she was a guest on Glenn Doyle's podcast, I believe that's where I heard it, was asking someone, what does love look like for you right now?
Mm.
And, Be ready for that answer. Don't ask somebody that question unless you want them to tell you.
Yeah.
And then once they tell you, you're not necessarily on the hook to do that thing, but you're now the person who knows the answer to that question. So you better be ready if you're going to be willing to ask it.
Or instead of love, you could say, what does support look like for you right now? That's another one to go with if you're not, if depending you're not comfortable.
On who, right.
If you're not, depending on the relationship, obviously. And she also reminds us that, caring for somebody else, as sometimes we both do, is you can kind of put your needs to the side and ignore your own physical and mental health,
right?
And be focused on that other person, and then you can quickly deteriorate and not be able to provide the best support for that other person because you're ignoring your own mental health.
Yeah, and it is important to, like we've talked about so many times before, secure your own mask before helping the person next to you.
Yeah.
Because if you're trying to help somebody out right now, but as a result you're going to be in crisis a few minutes or a few days or a few weeks down the road because you weren't taking care of yourself, then now you're going to have two people with problems that you have to solve instead of just one person, and that makes it even worse.
Yeah. And the reason why that's so tough sometimes is because I know for me, it's tough because it means you need to set some boundaries and enforce them. And that means potentially having uncomfortable conversations with people as you enforce your boundaries and saying, hey, I can do this much for you. I can be here so much, but I need to do X, Y, and Z for myself,
right?
For whatever reason. And, it might seem selfish at times. It might seem like you don't care as much, but you're not, most of the time we're doing that so that we can be our best selves for that other person as well as for ourselves.
Yeah. And so much of the time, and I don't know if you do this too, but I find that the worst version I experience of the boundary setting conversation is the version of it that only exists in my brain.
Correct. Yes.
You know what I mean?
Again, it's going to that extreme, right? Panic. And this person is going to freak out, whatever. And most of the time you're right. I mean,
it almost never happens.
Nope. And because most of the time, when we express it, it's not in a, go screw you. I'm,
right.
I'm done with this. It never comes out that way. I think if it did, then we could, then it might be a little bit closer to what we're imagining in our brain. But a lot of times it's like, and a lot of times it's not unreasonable requests. It's not like, I just need a couple hours, or I just need, I need to, can't do it today. Yeah. And it's crazy how our brains just go to that extreme.
Yeah. We anticipate, oh no, this is going to turn into World War III. So I have to go along with it right now. And then I'll just worry about resenting it later. Yeah. And it's like, no, you could just say, I'm not up for that right now, but I'll try to do something else to help you out. And 99 times out of 100, the person that you're fearing this conversation with is like, okay, cool. Thanks.
Yeah.
And everything's fine.
and in the past, I had, before reading No More Mr. Nice Guy and this, and I have just ignored my own needs, and then just build up this resentment. And then eventually, when my needs, when I'm a mess and I can't help anymore, then I get, then I explode. And I'm like, well, I'm done with this whole situation kind of thing. And, and at that point, that's so much worse rather than just having that slightly uncomfortable conversation at the beginning. So just like everything else, as you practice that, it becomes a little bit more, you become more confident in that. It becomes a little bit more ingrained. You carve out those neural pathways to having those uncomfortable conversations and forcing those boundaries. And it gets easier and easier over time. And it's just so much more beneficial in the long run.
No, absolutely. All right. Anything else to share on this chapter on emotional pain?
The other piece that was important. So she, in this last chapter, she talks about, it was a bolded list of all the things that you can do to help somebody who's really struggling with mental health. One of the more important things here is if you start hearing them say they feel hopeless, helpless, can't see a way out, that's when you bring in a professional. Or if you feel like their safety is in danger, at that point, you want to help, but you bring in a professional at that point.
Yeah, you don't want to you don't want to be stuck with this idea of, oh, what if I had said something to somebody before it was too late? Just, yeah, when people start talking like they're out of options, then you usually have to go outside of yourself to help find them an option. So
Yeah.
they, and again, there's some people that you just can't you can't talk into getting help for themselves, but it is important to recognize the real bad situations before they happen and try to intervene as best you can, and how you have the power to do so. Okay, so next week we're going to talk about grief, which is probably going to be a rough one, and yeah, I'm looking forward to catching up on this part of the book and seeing what the next step in learning about what nobody has told me, why nobody's told me this stuff before. So
Yeah.
I love this book. I love Dr. Julie. She's great on Instagram. Speaking of Instagram, as we say at the beginning and end of every episode, follow us on Instagram at Mindfully Masculine. We're getting much more active on our Instagram, sharing stuff from Dan's putting stuff up there. I'm putting stuff up there. The two of us, when we hang out together, we're putting stuff up there. So join us on Mindfully Masculine on Instagram and look at what kind of nonsense we're up to.
Well said, Charles. Yeah, this is great. Yeah, we'll talk soon.
Okay, sounds good, Dan. Talk to you later.
Yep. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.